You teenager, is that how you say it? Can you hear everything all right? Now? Guitar and voice. Okay, so I have just been asked to learn some songs for a show, and some of them, Jeff, TNA Jeff. Okay, thank you. Thanks for the confirmation. Otherwise, I could have just done half an hour of silence. That would not be fun, and I've certainly done that before. So I've been asked to learn a bunch of songs. Some of them I know, some of them I'm familiar with, and some of them I've never heard before. So I thought it'd be useful in this short live stream I'm going to do to talk about how I learn songs and how I learn them in a way to learn them fast and also to get them to stick in my memory, at least for the duration of the practice period up to the show. I mean, usually after a show, yeah, if you don't practice what you've learned, then you start to forget it, right? So sometimes I have to learn 30 songs or 60 songs, and then the next week I do another gig with another band and I need to learn another 30 or 60 songs. So there's only so much you can hold in your memory, but I thought I'd talk about my method for learning songs. So I think the first thing to do is to get a list of the songs and the keys that they're going to be played in. If you're working with a singer, you know, they'll say, oh, I want to do this song. Maybe it's a John Mayer song or something. Maybe it's Gravity by John Mayer. And I know that's in G. But their voice might not be up to it in G, or it might be too low for them or something like that. And they might decide to do it in, I don't know, B or something else. And it's important that something else is explicitly stated. So I always ask at the very top of the shop, are they in the original keys or not? Because that makes a big difference. Now, if you're not working with a band or a singer or anything like that, and you just want to learn songs for yourself, you can play them in the original keys, because unless you're going to be singing yourself, which some people do, but most people don't, they just want to learn the song how it is on the record so they can play along to it, play it to their friends. So the first thing I do is to listen to the song repeatedly. I don't mean, I listen to it 3 or 4 times. I mean, for the first kind of at least 48 hours, I make a playlist with the songs that I want to learn or have to learn. And I just only listen to that. Okay. I completely immerse myself, and I'm listening to it all the time when I'm doing stuff, other stuff, going on a hike, going to the gym, doing whatever. If there's an available time that I could be listening, I'm listening to it. And what that does, I find, is it stops you listening as a fan or as a consumer of music. And after, I don't know, 100, 200, 300 listens, you stop being the audience, and you start to become more of somebody who's a bit more analytical about the song, because you're not singing along anymore. You've heard it so many times that novelty's worn off. Okay, and now you're into being more objective about the song itself. And, the more you put it in there, then the more your brain's going to tell you, oh, yeah, you've got that bit right, or you've not quite got that bit. So immersion and repetition is the first thing I do. And that's before I even really pick up the guitar, just to kind of prime my brain. The next thing I do once that period is gone, I make sure I go and listen to different versions. And also it's a question I ask, because, some jazz standards and things, there's lots of different versions in lots of different keys and lots of different arrangements. So I also kind of confirm what the arrangement is, or if they don't know, they might like 2 or 3, or I might like 2 or 3 versions. Particularly, let's give an example of Georgia by Ray Charles, or Ray Charles's version of Georgia on My Mind. Now, Ray Charles didn't write the song, and if you get the original chart from the fake book or the real book, it's slightly different to the way Ray Charles has arranged it, and there's a couple of chord tweaks he's made. I like the Ray Charles version, so you might just get a chart off the internet, and that will give you the chords probably from the original version, but you need to make sure that the artist has written that song, or if he hasn't, the arrangement that they're going to do. So you might have to listen to several versions to kind of figure it out. Okay, so once you've got those things in place, then you can confirm pointers about how you're going to play it. You know, because there's an E here, there's an E here, there's an E here. So if there's an E in the song, which one of those did the original artist, or there's one here also, which one of those did they choose to play? Some people take pride in learning an artist's song exactly off the record, you know, exactly how they played it, exactly at the position on the fretboard they played it, and exactly the shapes that they played it. And the only way to do that is to check YouTube or some other video resource where you can find live performances of that artist playing. And although some of the camera angles and stuff, because of the edits, they might not be on that person's fingers all the time, sometimes you can get an idea, even if you can't see exactly where their fingers are. You can see that, you know, they're down at this end of the fretboard rather than up this end. So in terms of that E example, it might be that one, it might be that one, but, you know, more likely to be that one. But you can spot an open E because of the ringing open strings. But yeah, getting some live performance stuff, it just helps build a picture, right? And then I looking at some tab or charts. Now, a lot of people, particularly when I was learning, I just learnt by tab. I didn't learn new songs by tab. I learnt songs that I already knew, but just didn't quite know how to play or wasn't quick enough to figure them out by ear. So tabs got its uses, and I still use some of it today, but most of the time I don't trust anybody else's ears apart from myself, because, you know, I'm the dude who's got to play it. So I will tab stuff out myself. I did a recent video on how to play Black Cat Bone, or the solo to Black Cat Bone, a live version of Matt Schofield's version. And this is how I start. This is as you can see, it says Black Cat Bone, Matt Schofield with Prakash John and Jordan John, Mixed Grill in Oakville, Ontario. Okay, and this is my transcription. So I start with it with literally pen and paper. And once I've gone through that a couple of times, I might do it properly on the computer. But I always do it with a pen and piece of paper first, because I always make mistakes, because I might start thinking it's this note here on the D string at the 5th fret, and then later on, when other phrases I've worked out, I find out that actually it's an open G string rather than the fretted G at the 5th fret of the D string. Stuff like that. So it just allows you a bit of, you know, leeway to scribble out. But for those of you not transcribing anything, just grabbing the tab from Ultimate Guitar or maybe from Songster, that's great for learning stuff, and it's something that I think is unavoidable when you're trying to figure something out, just to save you time. But what I never did, Dylan S, how did you originally train your ear before you started transcribing? That's a really good question, because I know a lot of people struggle with ear training, having an awareness of training their ear, or even, you know, knowing where to start. Now, I've actually got an ear training bootcamp course. If you're interested, I'll pop the link in the chat. But really, Dylan, I didn't have any choice, because I started learning guitar at a time before the internet existed. Okay, so the choices for learning a song were really very limited. You could maybe go to the library and try and find a songbook, but back in those days, everything was written in traditional music stave stuff, and there wasn't any tablature for ages. So a library book, or maybe somebody could show you it. Or there was music shops which would sell books of music, but again, those were all in sheet music, which for me at that time, completely useless and very expensive also. So I had to do it the old school way, which is just to spend a lot of time listening to the song and pausing the song, like listening to a few seconds and pausing it, trying to figure out the start and the end. Like if it was a lick, I'd try and get the start note and try and get the end note. So I had these two kind of marker points. Okay, it starts here and it ends here, and I just now need to work out what happens in the middle. So I didn't really officially enter into any ear training, but all the songs I learned were by ear because I had no choice. These days, I think a lot of people can get the tab or they can get the chart and start playing the song, and that's really fantastic that it gets them up and running sooner. But what it doesn't help them do is understand if their tab is wrong, or also help them develop that ear, because learning ear is a real skill, because it strengthens this connection between your ears, your brain, and your fingers. So if you hear something in your head, I don't know, if you're trying to write a melody or something, and you're going do 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 do, you need to kind of go here, do 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 do, and be able to quickly find it. Okay, but there's a lot of notes here that you could choose from, and trying to find it will take a long time. Jeff says, would you say that spending a long time listening and going down that route is worth it? Longer time scale, but better payoff? Yes, absolutely. Even if it's something that you do briefly in your practice, I would recommend everybody does it, even if it's for 5 or 10 minutes. And it is slow going, Jeff. It is, because when you start, you're not very good at it. But it's a case of the more you do it, the better your ear gets attuned and the easier it becomes and the quicker you make these connections. And I think a lot of people in their guitar practice don't include ear training or working out things by ear, transcribing, or just listening and trying to work out what you hear. They don't do that because there's so much focus on technique. Oh, I'm going to work on my 16th note triplets, or I'm going to work on my sweep picking arpeggios, or I'm going to work on whatever it is. It's all technique, and technique is definitely part of it. But if you can't hear what you're playing, if you can't, understand what it is, then things are very hard always. Whereas if you build an ear and get a sense for certain motifs in music and certain movements in music, you start to recognize certain chord changes. And even if you're working out a song you've never heard before, you go, oh, I know where this is going to go next, because quite a lot of songs, they move to this chord after this, something like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend putting in the work, Jeff. Start today. The sooner you get started, the easier it becomes. It is a bit of a long road, but the benefit in the long term is it filters down to all your other parts, aspects of your playing. Because you get to figure out songs quicker, you get to understand solos more easily, and you get to communicate with other people about stuff, in a more efficient way. So definitely, I think that's something that's missing generally from people practicing guitar these days. In fact, I saw an example of this. Somebody posted a performance on a Facebook group I'm in, and the guy was really good. Okay, his licks were great, his timing was awesome. He'd obviously been playing, I don't know, at least 10 years. It's hard to tell these days, but it was of a really good standard. What I'm saying, it wasn't fumbling around, had a groove. Okay, but the only thing was, despite this person's ability, technique, timing, they were playing to a backing track, and that backing track was in E flat, and yet they were playing with huge conviction in E. Now, that's a problem, right? If the backing track's in E flat and you're playing with E, you're playing in the wrong key. And this guy played for 4 minutes. He didn't start wrong and then put himself right. He literally played with great conviction, great solo, great timing for 4 minutes, but in E. Okay. Now that's a shocking thing, right? Music 101 is you have to play in the same key as the music, right? Otherwise, it's not music. Well, it might be some kind of music, but it's not the kind I want to listen to. But it just goes to prove that some people just can't hear. So yeah, put in the hours, train your ear. even if it's, simple things. Like I give my students, I say, okay, go and work out the opening melody line to Gravity by John Mayer. Okay, no cheating. Or the little opening melodic theme for Wonderful Tonight by Clapton. Or I don't know, what else do I use? I use Never Say Goodbye by Bon Jovi. All basically songs that have little melodic motifs in the beginning. So I just get them started with, I don't know, 8 or 10 notes. Okay, but the important thing is to get them started. Okay, so the thing I never used to do when I got tab, although I was familiar with the song when I got tab, was to ever really pay attention to the chord changes that were happening underneath the tab stuff. I was lazy and I didn't bother. And that cost me, because if I was, I don't know, playing Sultans of Swing or something, and all the bits I really, really loved, the impressive bits, and I lost my place, I couldn't even improvise from that point, because I didn't know what chord was happening at that point. So it's not like I could go, okay, I can't remember what the tab was, but at this point we're in the chord is A7, so then I could make something up that was around an A7, right? I would just be like, don't know where I am. Maybe wait till a couple of bars until I could figure out where I was again, and that wasn't really very constructive. So having an awareness of the chords on it, write them down. Write down the chords and understand where they fall in relation to the tab stuff you're doing. Got to be aware of those changes. Now, the other thing I do, and I would encourage you to do, is if you're learning a song, try to learn it in Roman numerals. Okay, if you know about chords in a key, do that, because it makes it more portable. Okay, so I did this on a live stream last week or the week before, talking about chords in the key. So chords in the key, basically the root of your key is your one chord, and everything is based around that. So you use the major scale in conjunction with where you are in the key to figure out your chords in the key. So this is our one chord, we're playing in A major. If we want to find our 4 chord, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, and we walk up the major scale till we reach the 4th note, and then we build a chord from there, with that 4th note being the root note of our 4 chord. So you will hear stuff like it's a 1, 4, 5, which means it's a 1, this is a 4, and this is a 5, or it's a 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. This is a 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. The reason I write it in numerals rather than say it's A to D and E and F sharp minor is, I've had people work with songs for weeks, even though I've asked about original keys, and then they've gone, oh, I tried to sing it and I'm not as young as I used to be, and so I can't sing it as high, so can we take it down a tone? Okay, and I've literally had that the night before a gig, working with a professional singer actually, and I was a little bit annoyed because I expect a bit more from professional singers than just them going, you know what, can we change the key at the 11th hour after having the songs and having them chosen the songs 3 weeks before. So that means if they needed to take it down a tone, you're not having to go, oh, I was in A, and you just go, okay, so it's a 1, 4, 5, not now in A, but they moved it down to G. So now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. It just makes it more portable, and it's just a safety net for me. Okay, getting down into the nitty gritty of how to learn them fast. Try and learn a song as modular units. See it like, a song is a verse, a bridge, and a chorus. Okay, so don't really learn the song as in the entire song, because the song it might go verse, bridge, chorus, but learn the verse first and be really familiar with that module. Because sometimes in a live situation or working with other people or a jam, it might not follow the same structure and order as it does on the original recording. It might go verse, bridge, chorus. So learning them in modular pieces helps when you need to rearrange stuff, different orders, that kind of thing. Okay, so I wanted to also talk about using techniques I use for getting them to stick. So I do make my own charts. You might not feel that you want to transcribe everything. Now there's different charts. Okay, there's kind of charts like this which are note for note transcriptions because that's a solo. Okay, then there's stuff like this. This is a chart for Black Velvet, which isn't anything really apart from the chords, okay, and the structure. So I know probably about 400 songs, or I've played about 400 to 500 songs in my career. Not that I remember all of those, but I do have these things to help me remember. If I've charted this thing once, then I can always go back. If I haven't played a song for 2 years, I can go back and play it off the chart, or at least refresh my memory. And so what I want to emphasize is making something like this might take a little bit of time, but it's the actual process of going through and making the chart and having that focused listen and writing down the chords. It's actually this process that is the thing that helps it embed in your memory. It's the writing of this chart and the process of you spending time with this song, pausing, listen, write it down, pause, listen until you have the whole song. Okay, this actually is the end product. Okay, and most of the time when I chart a song, because I spent a lot of time with the song listening and charting it, this is something I 9 times out of 10 don't actually need when it comes to playing it, because I've spent hours with the song. It's kind of like, I guess, flashcards or writing lines when you've been naughty at school, or having to write spelling words. When you were learning to spell, if you got a word wrong, you'd have to spell it correctly 10 times. It's that process rather than this end product that really helps. Dylan, so can everyone learn to hear a chord and be able to name it? Yes, absolutely. Something complex like A flat diminished 9 or whatever. Well, there are some people that can do that. I definitely not somebody who has that level of sophistication. But to give you an example, I can definitely identify open chords, okay? And certainly I can identify what open chords are what, even if I can't see who's playing them, because open chords have a different sound to bar chords. And I can identify, some of the complex chords like major 9, 6/9 chords, major 6, diminished chords, diminished 7 chords. But where my sophistication stops is when you start adding alterations on. So you might have like a B flat 9 sharp 11. Okay, I wouldn't probably hear the sharp 11. I could give you an A flat sharp 9, whatever it is I said. I could get most of it, but not all of it. And then I would just go through and listen and do the pause button thing, or there'll be one tone in there that sticks out. Anyone can do it, Dylan. It's just a matter of getting started. And one of the ways to get started would be to listen to a chord and try and, you have to hum. The secret to ear training is you have to hum or sing what you hear. That doesn't mean you have to sing or hum for other people, but it does mean you have to sing and internalize and externalize. Okay, if you're not up for doing that, then the game is off, because you can't do it. So I'd start with maybe like this and try and hum one of those. You could go doo, 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 doo. That's a bit high for me, but start by trying to go doo 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 doo, and understand that that's a major sounding chord. Okay, basic major chord. basic minor chord will have a different feeling to it. And what I teach in my ear training course, if you're just starting out, is to start with just identifying basic major or minor things, because all chords are built on major or minor kind of building blocks, and then extra stuff gets added on top. I mean, for the most part. So, you know, if it's a minor 7 flat 5, if you can't hear the flat 5, then you might hear the minor 7. If you can't hear the minor 7, you might be able to hear, you could at least hear the minor. Okay, so it's kind of like if there's like a big chord, minor 7 flat 5 sharp 9, you can't hear that, then you might be able to minor 7 flat 9. If you can't hear that, you can hear the minor 7. If you can't hear that, you can hear the minor. What's important is you get started, and there's two things you can use. This is what I teach. If you're not sure which is major or minor, you're hearing chords and you're not sure, then you can use the Star Spangled Banner melody, and if it fits, then that's major. Okay, if it seems to clash with what the chord is, then that chord is probably minor. Similarly, I use the opening of Stairway to Heaven. Okay, so if you go do 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 do, that's a minor chord. Do do do. That's the 3 tones of a minor chord. So if you're trying to identify whether it's minor and it's this chord, and you're going do do do, and you get to that do, and there's a terrible kind of, oh, something bad's happening there. That means that what you're singing is different to what's being played in terms of its tonality. So for major, I teach people to use the Star Spangled Banner melody over the chord, and if it fits, then you can conclude it's a major chord. And if you use the opening to Stairway to Heaven and that fits, then the tonality of the chord is likely minor chord. That's one of the things you can get started with your training. There's a bunch of other in there. Some people have difficulty finding or hearing certain notes in the chord, like they tried to find the root note of the chord, they tried to sing the root note of the chord, but they can only find the 3rd and the 5th, for example. I think the idea with chords is you try and find the lowest note and then the highest note, and then try and fill in the blanks there. But if you keep on hearing that kind of middle notes in the chord, then you kind of just need to try to aim for the lowest. Repeat the listening and aim for the lowest note in the chord. Okay, I'm going to pop it in. There's no Dylan. Here's the link to the ear training course. If I can put it in, have a look at the curriculum, see what you think. If you've got any questions, then certainly let me know. All right, so back to learning songs. So if you're going to write a chart, great. If you're going to use somebody else's chart, great. But learn them in a modular way. That's the most important thing. And then when you start learning them, make sure you play across the transitions. And by this, if you've got like a verse that's going like, and then there's a bridge that goes like, oh, that's a rubbish verse. You need to make sure you play across that transition. So that's module part 1, okay? And then you need to, so you need to really concentrate on the transition between the end of one section and the beginning of another section. So pay attention here, because now you need to change to the next module. And it's always when the brain is faced with a new packet of information, okay? Okay, going from the verse to the bridge is that tiny space where the brain needs to go, okay, we're stopping doing the verse, now we're doing the bridge. And it's that period of transition that usually throws people, and they kind of go, oh, I know the verse. Yeah. And then they'll go, oh yeah, it's down here. And there's a period where the brain's like, oh, what's happening? Oh yeah, it's here. So to try and shorten that time, practice across the changes. Practice from the end of one bit to the beginning of another bit, all right? Another thing to help it stick is practice the song from where you stuffed it up. Okay. Here's a story. I was at a party and there was a girl there, a young girl. She was, I don't know, 9 or 10 years old. She could play guitar a little bit, and it was her dad's 40th birthday. And she secretly was with her grandma, I think, in a room learning to play the melody to Happy Birthday so she could play it to her dad. Lovely idea. And I happened to kind of walk past and see what they were doing, and she was going, oh, okay. And she kept on stuffing up. Actually, I don't think she stuffed up as early as that. It was this bit. Yeah, she was, when that leap happened, she was always messing it up. And the grandma was getting really cross with her, going, do it again, do it again. We've only got 10 minutes to learn this. Your dad is going to come out in a minute and we need to, the cake's coming out. Like, no pressure for the kid, you know. The grandma was pretty fierce, shall we say. And I was like, should I get involved in this or should I stay out? Anyway, what I noticed was every time that she stuffed up, grandma would make her go back to the beginning, start at the beginning. But she wasn't messing up the beginning. She was messing up the big leap at the end. She had that. First phrase was fine. Second phrase was fine. It was the third phrase that was causing her problems. And yet by the end of it, I don't know, I watched this for about 2 minutes before I couldn't help myself. And I did. I'm not sure if I waded in, but I just kind of made a polite suggestion. But if you think about it, if you keep on messing up the third phrase and you keep on going back to the beginning, in 2 minutes of practicing, you've probably practiced these bits, I don't know, 20 times. And these aren't the bits you've got a problem with. But, you know, every time you stop and get to that bit, you've not practiced this correctly ever so far. So don't worry about these bits because you know them, right? Just get that bit right and then move on. And then think about the fourth phrase, you know, because she kept on stuffing up the third phrase. She never actually got to practice the fourth phrase. So it tends to be this distribution curve that people know the beginning of the song really well, and then their knowledge diminishes as it goes through later into the song, and their knowledge of the end is very vague because at some point in the middle they keep stopping and then going back to the start. So the end of the song never gets practiced. So I stepped in and said, hey, maybe you should just try starting from that third phrase because that's a tricky bit for you. Once you've got that, you've totally nailed it. Of course, I got daggers look from the grandma, but she tried it, and you know, in I don't know, 45 to 60 seconds, she'd managed to do, and the rest of it, and then that was fine. And then she went out and played with her dad, and she played it perfectly. But I kind of feel that if they kept doing that, she would have just managed to do the first 3 phrases, probably stuffed up the third phrase, and then definitely stuffed up the fourth phrase because they hadn't practiced it. So that's a simple idea, Jeff. Yeah, it's simple, but I don't know. Kind of sometimes the obvious gets missed, I think. Definitely. Now, I did write a blog post about this a little while ago, so I'm just going to refer to this. I use this phrase. I'm going to coin this phrase li-fi, not Wi-Fi or hi-fi, but li-fi, L-I-F-I. So copyright, TM, me. Okay, li-fi stands for last input, first input. And what that practically means is, to help you solidify learning guitar parts quickly, you make sure that the last input signal to your brain at night is one of the things that you need to practice. And then when you wake up in the morning, before you make coffee, before you speak to anyone, before you put on music, before you meditate, whatever you do in the morning, before you do any of your morning routine, you go back to your guitar, pick it up, and play exactly the same thing that you were learning, and make it the first input signal of the day. So last input signal of the night, first input signal in the day. So your brain the day before has dealt with the clutter of the day, and now the day's ending. Your brain is quietening, and that's actually a great time to solidify some things. And then have a good night's sleep, wake up, and make it the first thing you learn. And last thing at night, first thing in the morning is something that really works for me. And also, the science bit is, the brain builds neural connections when you sleep, or it strengthens the neural connections you've made during the day while you sleep. So learning something last thing at night gives the brain something to work with, and you're basically leveraging your subconscious to do some of the heavy lifting, because your subconscious is dealing with that, processing that, and then you wake up again the next day and you hit it with the first thing, and immediately, the more times you do it, in that respect, you strengthen those things. Okay, so before you go to bed, and play them again as soon as you wake up. Right. Another thing that will help you learn, if you're not playing with a band, hang on, Dylan says, how much harder does distortion make it to recognize notes and chords? Would it be better to practice on cleaner songs? Yes, distortion does mask things to a degree, Dylan. It would be better to start with cleaner. And in the course, I actually do some clean examples and some distorted examples of the same thing, so you can hear the difference and how things are affected. It does depend on how much distortion and what kind of genre. Obviously, like classic rock distortion is a bit different to kind of like black metal distortion. So it depends what you're trying to figure out. But I think the reason I put together this ear training boot camp was because there's lots of apps and stuff that will train your ear, which are great. And definitely that should be part of your ear training as well. There's one called Functional Ear Trainer, which is good. There's one called Chord Prog, which is also really good. But these all use piano sounds as examples. Okay, and as a guitar player, you wanted to hone in on deciphering guitar sounds, right? So while generally training your ear with those ear training apps is something you should definitely do, it'll only take you so far, because you need to listen to how a guitar chord sounds, or how a solo on the guitar is played with distortion, with delay, with effect, all these things that doesn't happen with piano. So you kind of need to really zone in on what sound the guitar does. And there's quite a few options. I do talk about this again in the course, but there's things like open tunings. Well, how do you recognize when a guitar's in an open tuning? How are you able to recognize when a guitar's not in a standard tuning? Because there's a lot of dudes like Slash and Eddie Van Halen, Jimi Hendrix, they tune down half a step, right? So how are you able to hear when they've done that? So there's several techniques I go through in there which helps you do that, because sometimes we do stuff. It's not like you can play piano in an open tuning. Piano's a piano. You can't put a capo on a piano. You can't change the tuning, and you can't do like a drop tuning. But with guitar you can, and these are some things that you need to develop an ear to recognize. I don't have a problem, with those things. Most of the time I can hear, oh yeah, somebody's struggling it for ages, and I'm like, this is in an open tuning. That's why you're struggling, because the order of your strings and the intervals that you're normally used to is no longer relevant. Okay, my next tip for learning and making it stick is to play it live, or in the style of a live performance. Okay, what I mean by that is, after a point, I don't know, after a few days of you learning it, maybe a week, is you go, okay, from now on, I'm only going to play it like it would be if I played it live in front of an audience. So that means if you stuff it up, there's no stopping and going back to the beginning. If you stuff it up, there's no slowing down to get that bit right with the bridge because you didn't quite learn the transition. There's none of that. Okay, if you drop a beat or two because you stuffed up one of the chords, there's no adding those extra beats on by once you figured out a way to play the correct chords, adding those beats on, because no, there's 4 beats in the bar, and if you've stuffed up 2 of them, and then you need to play 4 of them, you stuffed up 2 of them, you don't then add another 2 on. Okay, you have to only, if you stuff up 2 of them, then only play the next 2 and then move on. You have to play it like live situation, because that's the only way you're going to stop yourself from basically giving yourself a safety net and a get out clause every time you make a mistake. If you make a mistake, you have to deal with it. Okay, songs, especially when you play live, they're a train. Okay, and they're leaving the station and they're going without you if you don't catch up. So if you drop a beat, then you only play 3 beats of that bar. If you drop 2 beats, then there's only 2 beats remaining in that bar. But don't add stuff on, because time isn't elastic, right? Don't do that. And if you're playing with people, then you want to play the songs you've learned in a live context as quickly as possible. So get together with your buddies or the band or whatever, and that's your chance to firstly make sure everybody else knows what's going on. Everybody knows the arrangement. You can agree on the arrangement. You might decide to change a few things, but as long as everybody's there, and you maybe record that rehearsal so you know what's been agreed, or you make notes on that, then everybody knows where they stand. But also, those rules apply. So you can test your recall then in a live situation. It might be a rehearsal situation, nobody's watching, it's just a band practice, but it means you get to test your knowledge of, well, could you do without the chart to play it now because you've been living with it for a week or so? All of those things. Try not starting from the beginning in a band situation, and none of that. And also, if you're working with a singer, make sure the singer's not reading the songs off their phone at rehearsal. That really grinds my gears, to quote Peter Griffin from Family Guy. You're learning the song, so why is the singer reading the song? That's not cool. Okay, I don't go on stage with any charts or any lyrics when I'm singing. I don't have lyrics on the floor. I don't have an iPad on my mic stand. I think that's kind of cheating a little bit. It does depend on the situation. If you're playing like 30 songs one night with a jazz combo, and then you're playing 60 songs with a classic rock, okay. If you're going to do a lot in a week, then maybe some help would be necessary. But especially if you're a singer and you're doing an open mic, I don't expect people to be singing into a mic going like this. I don't want them to be looking at their phone while singing to me. I want them to look at me while singing to me, because a song is all about a connection, right? So I've been asked to learn this song called Hallelujah, I Love Her So, which I know from Ray Charles' version. So I just started learning about, I don't know, before I came on. Okay, Elf Herney, if not in a band, but you learn a new song and then another, then forget the older songs, do you think aiming for a repertoire of songs to continue practice is a good idea, and then add drop songs from there? Yes, I do. Definitely, repertoire is also part of playing guitar, which I don't think enough people include in their practice. They'll be polishing technique, like I say, I need to go faster with my picking, or I need to do, more sweep picking arpeggios, or whatever it is they're doing. But ear training and repertoire are two of the most valuable things, because and they kind of go together. If you're training your ear, you're listening to a lot of songs. If you're listening to a lot of songs, you're going to be familiar with a lot of songs. If you're familiar with songs, they're easier for you to learn them. But if you're just playing by yourself, yeah, I would recommend trying to learn a song at least every couple of weeks. Okay, and it doesn't have to be "Tornado of Souls" by Megadeth. It could be something simple. But learning songs, and even if you forget them, I mean, if you chart them out, Elf Herney. If you chart them out or write them down, I mean, here's one kind of chart. Okay, that's for kind of chords and stuff, and I will follow that. Use it to aid my memory. This is like a note for note transcription that I did. But then I'll also do like a quick one, like super quick takedown, like that. It's just like, okay, here's the chord and here's how many times, because sometimes I don't have my charting software or access to it. So Matthew Conley asks, how long does it typically take you to learn a new song? Depends on the complexity of the song, but usually, I don't know, three days to kind of let it settle, because I think there's probably a 3-phrase period of learning a song. There's the I know nothing period, when it's all brand new. That's the learning of the song. Then the next phase is, now I've learned the song, I need to use effective practice methods to continue deepening my memory of that song. And then the third phrase is a kind of playing it in kind of period, which usually mainly applies to live bands. But there'll be rehearsal or several rehearsals, or even you play the song live, and you will form an opinion about what worked and what didn't, what you could adjust, what you need to pay attention to when you played it live. And sometimes, I mean, I've been playing in a Hendrix tribute show for about 4 years now. This is maybe the 5th year coming up at the end of this year. And I listen back to, I've got recordings of most of the shows, and the first show to me it's not like it's awful, because we practiced really hard. We practiced for 121 days straight to get it as good as we could. But I can hear in the first recordings, my playing particularly, I'm reaching for it. I'm not scrabbling, but I'm not at ease as much as if you listen to the same recording, or rather a different recording of the same song. Now I've played it in long enough to be less panicked about, oh, where do I go next? Well, I'm just kind of, enough time has elapsed. I've played it enough, and it's been played in enough to be settled with me, and it comes easier. So depends on the complexity of the song, Matt, to be honest. But yeah, 3 to 5 days, and then I will chart it out and I will play it. I don't tend to learn songs for pleasure these days. It kind of sounds dumb, because I play guitar because it gives me a huge buzz. But usually I'm getting calls from people, and they need me to learn 30, 50 songs. So unless I come across a song that really floors me, like somebody introduces me to a new artist or a new song, and I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Like somebody did that recently. I was about 6 months ago with a soul singer called Umi. It's like this neo soul song. We did. I was asked to learn it for an audition. It's called Remember Me, and it was such a beautiful song. I was like, wow. I mean, I kind of had to learn it for an audition, but actually, if I hadn't needed to learn it for an audition, and this friend had just turned me on to this song, I would have learned it anyway, because it was just gorgeous. So, do you guys have any other questions about learning songs? Anything you could ask me about learning lots of songs together, or just learning a few? I think the things, just to recap what we talked about, is repetition and immersion, listening to it lots, playing over the transitions. So if you know the verse, then make sure you practice from the verse into the chorus. Okay, practice the last couple of bars of the verse into the first couple of bars of the chorus as separate things. Okay, always start practicing from where you stuffed up, because that's what needs the most attention. If you're continually stuffing up, you need to slow it down, because I don't know, 99 times out of 100, certainly with all the people I've teach and all the people who come to me with, I can't get this right. Basically, they're trying to do it faster than their brain can think about it. And I always say, I'm never going to be impressed with your speed. I'm always going to be impressed with the clarity of how you play it. Because, I teach guys and they're like, oh yeah, I want to, and I'm like, that sounds terrible. Yeah, but I kind of want to get it up to speed. Yeah, there's something to be said for just trying to do it as fast as you can. And there's definitely that's definitely one of the things you should try and do, is try and get up to speed. But certainly when you're in that first phase of learning it and second phase of practicing it, just give yourself a break, man. Don't put yourself under so much pressure. Learn it slowly. And by slowly, I don't mean pick a random tempo. I mean, if there's one change in that song that causes you a problem and you spend, I don't know, half a second in the chord change, then however long it takes you to make that chord change, that's the tempo of your song that you need to practice at. Your slowest change is the tempo of the song. Is there a way to learn to hear somebody playing and know what key it is? People with perfect pitch can do that, Dylan, but not usually. Also, the answer depends really on if can you see their hands? Can you see what they're playing? Because if you can see, that tells you a lot. That gives you a lot of clues about the key, because you can see where their hands are, and if they're down here, you can hear some open strings ringing. I know that's an E. If you're just going by hearing something, not being able to see anybody where their fingers are on the fretboard, then you'd have to be pretty skilled to recognize the key. People with perfect pitch can recognize the key. I can't recognize a key just by hearing it. Not so much. But typically, I know the people I play with, they tend to play guitar songs. Guitar songs tend to be in guitar-friendly keys, like E or A or D. Okay, guitar-friendly keys don't tend to be B flat or E flat. So that rules out a couple of them. Matthew Connolly, when learning a song, how do you know when you are ready to move on to learning another song? Should you keep practicing until you get the first song right, first song perfect? It depends on yourself. If you know yourself and you know that you kind of a bit flitty and a bit shiny object syndrome, which I think quite a lot of people are because there's so much good stuff out there, I would allow yourself to go and learn another song while you're still learning the first song, because otherwise you just get bored. And it's got to be fun, right? You do have to put in the work, but you do have to keep yourself interested and engaged. So how do you know when you're ready to move on? It's basically when you can play it through, I don't know, 5 or 6 times flawlessly. And again, people will say, oh, you've got to play it like 20 times absolutely perfectly, or whatever your number is. But I think probably 5 to 10 times is a good benchmark to show you've learned it, you've practiced it, and you've settled into playing that song. And you know the transitions. Your brain is moving faster than your fingers, and your brain's going, I know what's coming up, fingers get ready. And then you make all those things smoothly. That said, I practice an awful lot, but still on stage live, I make mistakes because I'm human like everybody else, and humans make mistakes. Even though you practiced it and for 50 times you played it as 50 times flawlessly and not one mistake, sometimes on stage there's a lot of other things going on. You might not have a good monitor mix, you might not be able to hear yourself because your amp is in a different place to it normally is, or there's all these other variables that can affect your playing, or you might not be getting a sound that you feel vibing about or whatever. So I don't beat myself about making mistakes in the performance, because we all do. And you should cut yourself a break. If you find that you've rehearsed this song 50 times and you're happy, and then you play it for somebody and you stuff it up, just laugh at it and move on. Okay, don't beat yourself up about it. It's nothing that you did there. Okay, because you did the work. If you just read the tab a couple of times and played it through a couple of times, and you were lazy and you made a mistake, then it's your own fault, and you didn't do the work. But if you did do it, then you just kind of have to go, hey, It happens. It literally does happen. Walter, welcome. It is proof of life. It's proof that we're human. You know, and I've seen big name acts play a bum note, and that makes me happy because they're very talented musicians, but they are just humans after all. Apart from Steve Vai, who's clearly been engineered from some kind of cyborg or something. Yeah, so Matthew, I hope that answers your question. You kind of have to have your benchmark, but 5 to 10 times playing it through. If you can play it to somebody like your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your partner, your kids, whatever, in a kind of informal way, and you can get through that as well, that's also a good benchmark, because it becomes less about the song and more about performing the song, right? Dylan, did you have a question? You just asked a question, then you took it back again. Maybe I answered it by talking. Okay, so this song I've just learned 5 minutes before I came on was this. Oh, I see. It's that Ray Charles song. Okay, so I made a couple of mistakes there because my brain's not moving faster than my fingers. If I did it a bit slower. I'm also thinking about how I'm going to voice lead this. Should I do that? Should I play it there? Or should I play it there? Same chord, just different. Dylan says, yeah, I said yeah to your answer, but it sounded like I was answering Matthew's. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to have to go now, guys. Thank you for joining me. But let me just recap everything in a couple of sentences. Immersion and repetition. Listen to the song until you stop being a fan of it. Start having an objective view. Check if anybody's done the work, anybody else with tabs or video lessons are always good, but you do need to have an ear about the song and have a certain familiarity to know whether those tabs are correct or that video lesson is correct, because sometimes people on YouTube get things wrong or aren't quite accurate. Depends what you're going for. There are people who want to learn a song exactly, and there are people who are like, well, if I can know the chords and just play along with some mates, I'm happy. You will know which one of those people you are, and sometimes I'm one of them. For the Hendrix show, I need to play note for note Jimmy stuff because that's what people are expecting, because it's a tribute show. But for playing with friends, it's a far more looser affair. But I've always personally, regardless of playing in a tribute show or not, I've always wanted to get things note for note first. I've always felt that if I can get the note for note thing down as a template, then I can use that as a jumping off point for any other stuff, for any improvisation or variation I want to do. Okay, check out live performances by the original artist to check where their fingers are. You might not be able to see exactly, but you will definitely know if they're, around this area as opposed to up this end of the fretboard. I always chart the song myself, and the process of charting a song is something that helps deeply embed the song in my memory. It's the writing with the pen and paper and the focused listening that does it, not the fact I'm making a chart. The chart is the end product of that process, and you can use it to jog your memory later on. But often when I spend the time charting, I find I don't need the chart. Use li-fi. Remember my trademarked phrase, li-fi, last input, first input. So last thing at night, last thing you do before you go to bed, play the part of the song you're working on. First thing in the morning, before you do anything else, play the part of the song you're working on. Do that and you'll find that the neural connections are far stronger. Play it in a context of a live situation as soon as you can. So no stopping and going back to the start when you stuff up, no expanding time to play the slow bits when you actually should play them at tempo. And start learning it from where you stuff it up. And if you keep stuffing it up, then slow it down. Your slowest change needs to be the tempo of the song. And then play across the transitions, okay? If you're learning it modular, verse, chorus, or whatever, play across the transitions. Elf Hermie, once you really memorize a song, it makes you feel a lot freer to actually look around and enjoy being there instead of being solely focused on not messing up. That's so right. And that's why I put a lot of time into learning song, because once you've got it down, you can enjoy being there, okay? You don't need to worry about here. You can enjoy here, okay? And sometimes, sometimes it's not possible. You haven't had enough time. Sometimes you kind of need to be concentrating. But for the most part, if you really work on that song, and even when you've played the show or done whatever it is, you continue to play it and keep it alive in your memory. The more you do it, the more relaxed you become. And I think, Elf Hermie, that's definitely what I was talking about, playing it in. You've got this period that you're here. You're still focused on here. And then eventually you start, the distance between here and here starts to move. And the head starts to move away from looking down to here and just occasional glances. And that is definitely when it's most enjoyable, because you get to connect with other people in the audience. You get to connect with other band members. You decide, hey, we're going to put a push in here. And you might be doing some additional window dressing with the bass player and the drummer. You just might be having fun being creative in the moment on the fly, because you've got the song down. So now you can be creative with other bits you want to do. Okay. Thank you for joining me today. I said it was going to be brief. I said it was going to be half an hour, but look, it's already an hour. So clearly I've been talking way too much. Thanks for joining me. I'll try and do another one around this time next week. If you've got any ideas for what you'd like me to talk about, then pop them in the chat. I will review the chat after this. If you are watching the replay of this live stream, then also please pop your comments about topics you'd like expanded on or explained or whatever it is. I like to make sure that I'm making stuff to help you guys out. And sometimes I have to guess at what would be useful. But the only way I know for sure whether it's useful is you telling me. Walter, well said. You've covered the bases. Definitely watch others play to see the fingering. Also loop the part you have trouble with and take it note for note. Good lesson. Well, you seem to be very onto it too, Walter. So good for you, mate. All right. Have a great rest of your day. And I will see you this time next week. All right. Bye for now, guys. Cheers.